Daf Yud Dalet Amud Aleph, the second line from the top. We learned previously that, according to Rav Yehuda, that even though Midaraisa, a Kohen Gadol who's an Oinen, that one of his close relatives died, he is allowed to do the Avodah, but he's not allowed to eat the kosher. Rav Yehuda is geyser. If we allow him to do the Avodah, he might come to eat the kosher. Therefore, he says it's also we're geyser that he cannot do the Avodah. Omer le Rav Ada bar Ava le Rava, he asked the following: Me goes the Rav Yehuda Shem Yoichol. Are we concerned? Do we see that Rav Yehuda is geyser that he might come to eat? I Vatanan, we learned in our Mishnah, Rav Yehuda Imer Af Ish Acheres Maskinim Loi. We prepare for the Kohen Gadol a substitute wife, Shema Tamus Ishta. Maybe his wife will die, and V'imaisi Ishta Avodah. Now we prepare another wife for him. So then in case his wife dies, he'll be able to do the Avodah because he has a substitute wife. But if his wife dies, he does the Avodah. So now, therefore, even though he's an Aninus, he does the Avodah. But however, it'll be also to eat the kosher. And we're not geyser that he's an Einan. And if his wife dies, if he does the Avodah, he might come to eat the kosher. Now, most of the kachim, they are not eaten anyway on Yom Kippur, but the Musaf Yom Kippur is a chatas that is eaten, and if he's an oinen, he's also to eat it. Nevertheless, we say that even if his wife dies, he does the avodah, and we're not geyser that he might come to eat. Amrle, the more answers, under those circumstances, there's no reason to be geyser. Because Hasan, in the case of our Mishnah, came in the Yom Kippurim, who is Yom Kippur, the Kuli Alma like Achla, nobody eats. So generally speaking, there's no eating done on that day. Hunami lo yasel mecho. So we're not geyser that he'll come to eat on that day, because generally nobody eats on Yom Kippur, so there's not such a chashash. But Hacha, on a regular day, the Kuli Alma Achli, everybody's eating. If he does the avodah, he'll do like everybody else does. We're afraid, and he might come to eat. So there he is, geyser. But on Yom Kippur, he won't come to be geyser. Correct the Gemara. Well, what in any event was the kasha? You're telling me that in case his wife dies, he's an einan, and he might come to eat, and he's also ba'achila. But does he really have a ninus in that the scenario that we're talking about according to Rav Yehuda? We just said according to Rav Yehuda that he gives his wife a get al tanai, and therefore we see that he will, the condition that we learned previously in the Gemara, that if his wife dies in Yom Kippur, he'll go into the shul, and then lemafreya, retroactively, she will have been divorced, so they were never married. So therefore, they weren't married on that day when she died, and he won't be an einan midarais. He's not an einan. So what's the kasha to begin with? More answer is no. If we would be geyser al achila, not for the fact that it's Yom Kippur, then there would be a reason to be geyser, because nehida ninis lechalala, even though he's not an einan per se, but atrude mi loy mitra, doesn't he have the sorrow? I mean, technically, he gave her a divorce so that he would not have two wives on Yom Kippur. But technically he gave her the divorce to avoid that problem. But they were married, and therefore, even though technically it's not his wife, he still feels the sorrow, the tsar for it. Now, kachim have to be eaten lemoshcha, legedula, like in royalty. If he's bitzar, even though it's not a technical aninus, but emotionally his wife died, he's bitzar, he has sorrow, he won't be able to eat, also to eat the kachim in that matzav under those circumstances. Therefore, there might have been a reason to be geyser, but nevertheless, we're not geyser because nobody eats. He won't come to eat either. It's Yom Kippur. Zok Mishnah. So we learned previously that the Kohen Gadol is sequestered for 7 days by Yom Kippur, and he therefore to prepare him for the day of Yom Kippur for the avodah. So the Mishnah now he explains and details how we prepare him in other manners as well, not only to sequestering. It says, Zok Mishnah, Kol Shivas Yomi Masechet Sadam. He practices doing the avodah so that he'll be proficient in the avodah for Yom Kippur. So all the 7 days he does is Rikas Sadam of the Talmud, of the Korbanos of the Talmud. The Maktiv Sekataris, and he burns the Kataris. Umetiv as a Neiros, and he prepares the Neiros. He removes the ashes and old wicks from the menorah. and he prepares the menorah for the lighting of the today's neiros. Umakriv is a reish as a regel, and he brings to the mizbeach from the tamid the head and the hind leg of the tamid, and that way he prepares himself for the Avodah Yom Kippur. V'shar kol hayomi mirotz lahakriv makriv. All other days that are not these days of before Yom Kippur, if he wants to be a makriv the korban, he can. He doesn't have to, but he has the option. Now, even though we say normally that the Kohanim divided into mishmoras, and they were divided into 24 mishmoras, they rotated about which groups do the avodah on which week, and the weeks themselves were divided up into batei avos, who does the avodah on a particular day. But the Kohen Gadol has, so to speak, veto power. If he wants to do the avodah, he can do the avodah. Shekayin Gadol makriv chelik b'reish. He has the right to be makriv any portion that he wants. He has a right to be makriv he has the first right to be makriv any portion. And also when they divide up the portions, he has also the right to take from the food. He has the right to take any portion of the food to eat that he wants. So to Gemara Matana, so it says that in our Mishnah that the Kohen Gadol did the avodah of the Kohen during that week of that he was sequestered. Who is the Tana that says he's even allowed to do the avodah? Mantan. Amar Rav Chisda, like Rabbi Kiva. It's not like Rabbi Kiva. But why is that? The Rabbi Kiva, because we be according to Rabbi Kiva, Amar Torah Shenaf Lav Hazah, that a person who's Torah and the waters of the mechatos of the paraduma fell on him or sprinkled on him, Tim also it makes him tamei. So hey Chavad Avodah. So according to Rabbi Kiva, how could he do the avodah? Meaning we said that they were during the period that they sequestered him, they were mazah on him on the every day they were mazah from the waters of the mechatos. But according to Rabbi Kiva, if you sprinkle on him the waters of the mechatos, it makes him tamei. He won't be able to do the avodah. The Sanya we learn of the Brisa v'hiza hator al hatomei. It says v'hiza hator al hatomei. So why does it have to say v'hiza hator al hatomei? Why does it have to specify v'hiza al hatomei? It could have said v'hiza hator, and we know that the person that he's sprinkling on is the person who's tomei. Why does it specify al hatomei? So therefore, to teach us al hatomei is tar. If the person he sprinkles on is a person who's tomei, the waters of the mechatas make him tar. But va'al tar tomei. If he sprinkles it on a person who's tar, it makes him tomei. Div Rabbi Kiva. V'chamayimrim, no. Elo dvorim halalu, ein dvorim halalu amur elo b'dvorim mekablim tuma. They said that the sprinkling only applies to the din of sprinkling, that it has a din of sprinkling only on. It's referring to things that are mekabel tuma, that is susceptible to tuma. We'll see what that means in a moment. But we see from Rabbi Kiva that he holds that a person who's tor, their mazer on the mechatas, it makes him tomei. So this that the Mishnah said that the Kohen Gadol does the avodah for the 7 days. How can he do the avodah if they sprinkle on him the mechatas? It makes him tomei. So apparently the Mishnah is not like Rabbi Kiva. So now we brought down this memra of the Chachamim. What is it that the Chachamim mean over here? They say, Ein advor malol amum el advor makabel tuma. Mai. What does that mean? Kindesnan, like we learned in the Mishnah. This kamen lahazas ala behema. If a person had intent to sprinkle the waters of the part of the mechatas on a behema, v'hiza ala adam, but instead he was mazeh on a person instead, im yesh be'ezav, if there's still waters remaining on the ezav and the hisav, then yishna, then he can then use that and sprinkle it on somebody that needs the waters of the mechatas. He can use that and sprinkle it again on a person who's told me to make him tar. It can be used. But however, but if he intended to sprinkle on a person, and instead he sprinkled on a behemoth. Now a behemoth, a live behemoth, is not makabel tuma. It's not makabel tuma. So if that's what happened and it was sprinkled on a behemoth, even if there is water, some left of the water, lo yeshna, he should not use that water anymore. Why is that? Because the halacha is by the mechatas, it cannot be used for a personal use. It cannot be used for malacha. It cannot be used for avoid. It has to be used for sprinkling. Now, If he intended to sprinkle it on a person, someone who's makabel tuma, and he sprinkled it on a person, he's matayar. If he discovered lahazas al behema, even though he intended behema, but in fact he sprinkled on a person, it was used for somebody who could be makabel tuma, and therefore it has a din of a hazah. However, if he sprinkled it on a behema, even if he intended to sprinkle it on, but in fact he sprinkled it on a behema, he was sprinkling it on something that was not makabel tuma, that's not a hazah. That's an avodah, that's a malacha. It passes the water and it can't be used. So therefore, the Chum say, where does it have a din of hazah? When it's on a tome, when it's on something that's makabel tuma, but not otherwise. My time with the Rabbi Kiva. Why does Rabbi Kiva say that if he sprinkled on someone who's torah, it makes him tome? Because the Rabbi Kiva says, it could have said that he's a tor Allah on him. My Allah tome. Why does it say on the tome shmamino Allah tome tor? Daf give it's tome tor Allah tor tome. Someone who is tor, it makes him tome. V'Rabbanan, according to Rabbanan, halat v'makam tumudasa, like was mentioned. Aval hacha, but as far as Rabbi Kiva's din, that if he sprinkles on somebody's tor, that Rabbi Kiva said makes him tome. How could that be? Kal v'chaymer. Imala tome tor. If somebody who's tome, the waters make him tor. Al hator, like kol sheken, on somebody's tor, then certainly he should be tor. If someone's tome makes him tor, you're going to tell me that someone's tor makes him tome? So it's kal v'chaymer that it should not be that way. Rabbi Kiva, he says, yes, you're right. Logically, you're correct. However, this is a chayk of paraduma. Hainu the kamish shlema, and that's what Shlomo Melech said when he said, I thought I would be a chacham, I thought I would be wise, but I see that it's far away from me. I don't have the full understanding. So that's what it's referring to. It's referring to this halacha, according to Rabbi Kiva, that it's metar the tomei, but it's matame the tor. V'Rabbanan, how do they understand Shlomo Melech's memra? Ahu lamaza v'lamaza malav tor. That's to teach us that lamaza, the person who sprinkles the water, and the person who's the water sprinkled on him, they're both tor. V'noigeya behen tomei. One who touches it, he's tomei. A person who touches it, and it's not used for the purpose of hazah. So he takes the need explains it. He touches it, but he's touching it not for the purpose of hazah. Then he's tomei. Someone who is sprinkled on him, and somebody who does the hazah, and the one who's sprinkled on him is tor. The one who touches it is tomei. Frank the Gemara, umaza tor, the one who sprinkles is tor. It says befresh in the pasuk, umaza, the one who sprinkles, that he's tomei, even his clothing are tomei. Where it says my maza and the geya. What does it mean, maza? It doesn't mean sprinkle, it means touching. Frank the Gemara, how can you say that? The pasuk says both. You can't say maza is nageya. The pasuk says so it says both, so it can't be one and the same. The oid, how can we say that they're one and the same? How can we say that maza and nageya are one and the same? They have different halachas. The halacha by maza is that the clothes, the person who sprinkles the mayim, his clothes also become tomei, and they need immersion. They need tefillah. But nageya, if he only touches, then loy boy kibus begodim. The clothes do not become tomei, they don't need tefillah. So you cannot say that they're one and the same. Whereas but again, maza does not mean literally the one who sprinkles. It means nice. It means who carries it. I mean, the one who carries the water, he is tomei, and tumas begodim also. His clothes are also tomei. The one who touches it is tomei, but his clothes are not tomei. Well, if you're telling me that what maza means is carrying, well, why doesn't it say carrying? Why does it say maza? Why does it refer to it as maza, sprinkling? My time exceed maza. Why does it say maza? More answers. How kamashmalan the beina shir hazo. It tells you that the one who carries it is tome. That's only that if he carries amount of water that is needed, that it can, a minimum amount that can be used for hazor, then the one who carries is tome. So it doesn't mean that he actually sprinkles it. The one that's mazah is tor, but the one who's nice, he carries the water, that shiur of water, he is tome. That's fine if you say that hazor needs a shear. But if you hold that hazor does not require this minimum shear, any amount of water that reaches the person who's tome, that is yaitza with that suffices. What are you going to say? More answers now. Even according to one says that the hazor does not need a minimum shear, that is on the person's body. That's falling on the person's body. There's no minimum shear. But there has to be a minimum shear in the vessel. It means in the kli that holds the water, there has to be a minimum shear. There is what lands on the person doesn't have to have a minimum shear, but there has to be a minimum shear in the kli, and therefore the person carrying the water, he is tome, and he needs to keep his begodim if there is that minimum amount in the kli. This like we learned in the Mishnah. What is the minimum that you say that there's a needed for hazor? Kedei yitbol is enough that one can dip the rosh givoilin, that he can dip the tips of the stems of the azav of the hyssop, b'yazeh, and be able to sprinkle. Meaning when he dips the givoilin, meaning he dips the hyssop into the water, an amount of water, quantity of water is absorbed by the stems, by the hyssop, by the azav. There has to be enough that even after it saturates the water, there's still enough of the water that it can still sprinkle and it can land on the person. So in the kli, you need more than the minimum amount of water that lands on the person. It has to be enough that you can dip the azav into the water, it gets absorbed with the water, and there's still water that you can now sprinkle on the person. Then that's a minimum amount. So if a person carries that amount, then he's tome for carrying it. The actual one who's mazeh, then he is not tome. So therefore we said apparently our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Kiva, because Rabbi Kiva says that the person who receives the waters of the mechatas, if he's tar, it makes him tome. Now the kohen gadol, the mazah on him all 7 days. How can it be like our Tana says in the Mishnah that he does the avodah? He'll be tome. So apparently our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Kiva. But Abaye Amri says no. Afilu tema Rabbi Kiva, you could say our Mishnah is like Rabbi Kiva. How is that? To avodah avodah kol yom. They don't mazim. They're not mazim at the beginning of the day. The beginning of the day, he does the avodah the entire day. Then ulapalnya marula. Then towards evening, they sprinkle the waters on him of the mechatas towards evening. So now he became tome. Then v'tovel, he goes and he's tovel vavid hevet shemesh, and then there's nightfall. So he's tome. He's tome for that short period of time. Towards the end of the day, they're mazeh. He becomes tome. He's tovel. He has herav shemesh. It's nightfall. Now he's tor. And the next day they repeat the same procedure. So therefore, they can accomplish both. He does the avodah at the beginning of the day, the mazah towards the end of the day, he's tovel, and the next day he's tar again to do the avodah.